Rewind 93.9 WYEC, mid-morning in the cities. I'm Sean Patrick. It's been just a couple days since the passing of pop legend Prince, and people are still talking about it. It's still fascinating people, and they want to know more. We're joined now by our national news correspondent, Jim Roope. And Jim, what we know right now is not much still, other than Prince has been cremated.
Yeah, cremated, a very small private service with family and close friends over the weekend. And where his ashes are being stored or interred or however they're being kept is as mysterious as his life was. We're not being told where his ashes will be kept. So privacy in death as privacy in life. But people are becoming very curious about Prince now. I mean, they always have been. But now about his religion, his Jehovah's Witness. He was born a Seventh-day Adventist, but became a Jehovah's Witness, I think, around 2003. He was actually baptized in Minnesota as a Jehovah's Witness. And who's going to inherit the $300 million estate that he has? So there's a lot of interest still, not just in how he died, but what happens next as they continue also to mourn his death, celebrate his life, and celebrate his music.
Yeah, that is remarkable. I mean, it is in this day and age with so much information being shared by celebrities. It's kind of amazing how little we know about Prince's private life.
Absolutely. I was reading an article about his work with the Jehovah's Witness and how he even engaged in those door-to-door Bible presentations that we have all, I think most of us at least, have encountered that knock on our door and somebody with a watchtower in their hands or saying they're Jehovah's Witness. And Prince actually engaged in that. There was one story of, as he was giving his presentation, one woman said, you look a lot like Prince. He goes, yeah, it's been said, and told her that his name was actually Rogers Nelson, never saying who he actually was. So very, very private in a lot of ways. And that's part of the mystery of who Prince is. We also found out, or who Prince was, rather, we also found out that that secret vault that is in Paisley Park holds enough music that new music, unreleased music, that he could release a new album every year for the next 100 years. So a very prolific songwriter. Everything he needed was right in that compound of his, so he never really had to go outside. The musicians would come to him if he decided to use them. Most of the time he played, or a lot of the times anyway, he played all the musical instruments himself. So it's just an incredible story as it starts to unravel what we didn't know about Prince far exceeds what we do know.
National news correspondent Jim Roope, our guest today on Mid-Morning in the Cities. We're talking about the death of Prince, and we'll continue this conversation next. You're listening to Mid-Morning in the Cities, presented by Curves Davenport on Rewind 93.9. We're talking with our national news correspondent Jim Roope today on Mid-Morning in the Cities. And Jim, let's talk about the other news out there. There is a timeline, at least, of the last day of Prince's life. We don't know what happened to him, but we know that there is a timeline.
Right, there is that mystery of what happened when he was dropped off. Wednesday night, he was out early evening, obviously, because he was dropped off around 8 o'clock back at Paisley Park by himself. We don't know who that person was that dropped him off or where they were before they were dropped off. I would imagine at some point after the investigation is complete, we will learn those details. But he, according to the Sheriff's Department, Jim Olson is the sheriff in Carver County, and he said that Prince spent the night alone at some point, and it was really unclear. Let me say this first. At some point, he got into the elevator and collapsed in the elevator. Now, whether he got in it on the first floor and was attempting to go up, or got in it on the second floor and came down, we don't know. We know that the elevator was found on the first floor. He was dressed, but it's still unclear if he was dressed in clothes that he wore that night that he was out on Wednesday, or if he was in pajamas or had changed clothes from that. So it's unclear. The story picks up Thursday morning when members of his staff tried to reach him and they couldn't. And it must have been a few attempts, because then the staff members decided to go to Paisley Park to check on him. And that's where they found him in this elevator, collapsed, and around 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, or somewhere around there. So between 8 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock in the morning, there's this 12-hour mystery of what might have happened. I don't know if the autopsy or toxicology reports or anything else is ever going to tell us. And it's unclear if there were video cameras in Paisley Park, because Prince didn't like to be photographed. In fact, people who came to his house weren't allowed to take pictures in there. So I don't even think there were surveillance cameras on the inside of the compound, or even on the outside for that matter. So I don't know that we're ever going to really understand or know exactly what happened, but that's the timeline as we know it now.
Jim Roope is our guest today on Mid Morning in the Cities, national news correspondent in California following the death of Prince. We're talking about any number of topics related to Prince because people are still fascinated days after his death. And we'll continue this conversation and wrap things up next. Mid Morning in the Cities presented by Curbs Davenport on Rewind 93.9. Our national news correspondent Jim Roope is our guest today on Mid Morning in the Cities, mystery surrounding Prince in his life and in his death. And one mystery, though, the one thing that's not a mystery is people still love his music. His Purple Rain is #1 on Billboard again.
Yeah, and Purple Rain, the film, is being screened all over the country on theaters, so that will add to the estate too, I'm sure. But yeah, and it's a shame because we forget somebody like Prince, whose music defined a generation, and it truly did. I mean, that Purple Rain, his sound, that Minnesota sound that we've come to call it, that he really started at Avenue 1 in Minneapolis, that sound has really infected a whole generation. And as you see those people who are milling around Paisley Park, and you realize, oh my goodness, 20 plus years ago, these people were being influenced by this guy's music, being entertained by this guy's music, being helped through whatever was going on in their lives by this guy's music. And you see the diversity in that crowd, and you think, this guy really reached a lot of people in a lot of kind of strange ways. But yeah, people just love his music, they loved him. The state of Minnesota, and it's their favorite son. There's plenty of petitions on change.org to call Minnesota the Purple State as a nickname, to change the Green Line extension to the Purple Line, to create April 21st as Prince Day in the state of Minnesota. So not just an entire state, but an entire country has really come to embrace the life that was Prince.
Well, Jim Roope, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Our national news correspondent, Jim Roope, there. If you missed any part of this conversation about Prince, the continuing interest in Prince just days after his death, you can catch this interview in full in our Mid Morning in the Cities podcast at QuadCityDailyNews.com. QuadCityDailyNews.com, powered by local radio. Mid Morning in the Cities is presented by Curbs Davenport on Rewind 93.